Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or maybe even good night. I'm Dr. Andrew Franklin, and in this presentation, folks, I'm going to talk about the soul. You know, the soul has been a really difficult term for philosophers and theologians and scientists and even the lay public to define. How do you go about defining the soul? It's something that many individuals may sense that they understand and know, but when you ask them to explain what the soul is, they may really struggle to define it. So in this presentation, folks, I'm going to offer some frameworks that have typically been employed to understand the soul. After I do that, folks, we're going to talk about how the soul is oftentimes used as a means to differentiate human beings from animals. After that piece of the lecture, folks, we're going to move into an in-depth conversation dealing with free will. You know, free will deals with this idea that we have the ability to control all of our actions in our environment. So I'm going to present some research literature that supports this idea of free will, and then I'm going to present some research literature that goes against this idea of free will and may cause you to question whether or not you really have control of all of your actions. So within this presentation, folks, we're going to look at neurological research as well as we're going to discuss some of the environmental research out there. So if you're interested in this content, grab you some popcorn, grab your side piece, grab your boo thing, grab your boyfriend, grab your girlfriend, maybe your husband, your wife, your fiance. Make sure at the least you have a pen and some paper so that you can take notes so that we can go wheels up and dig into some of this content. When many individuals discuss the term soul, they do it within a religious framework and connect it with being made in the image of God. For instance, within a Judeo-Christian belief system, it's thought that individuals are made in the image of God based on the creation narrative. Given that this is the case, one may ask, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? From here, several scientists have speculated that to be made in the image of God, to have a soul, means to have reason, volition, consciousness, and logic. It's also speculated that to be made in the image of God means to have a piece of our being that connects individuals to God in a way that is unique and different from other creations. Furthermore, a soul is thought to be something that is added to the body and non-material. One of the objections that is raised to that argument is the notion that many of the traits that make us human are also seen in animals, and this has been emphasized by Alasdair MacIntyre. Of course, there are perspectives out there that differ in their conceptualization of the soul. For instance, on the other end, there is a materialistic perspective that's put forth by Francis Crick before his passing in 2004. He emphasized that all of our experiences, our joys, our sorrows, our pains, our moments of triumph, as well as our moments of defeat and subjective experience of it, is nothing but nerve system, neurons, and chemicals. Thomas Metzinger believes that contemporary science offers a perspective of the soul that is incompatible with most religious traditions. Many Christians agree with Metzinger and Crick about its incompatibility and feel pressured to make a decision between science and their religious beliefs and experiences. However, there are some researchers out there that believe that there is an intellectual space where both viewpoints can be accepted. Now, this idea that humans have souls and animals do not is not a universally held position by theologians, scientists, and Christians. In fact, throughout church history, some have argued that animals have souls. Some of the individuals that have argued this includes Augustine and Aquinas. In addition to believing that souls allow us to have volition, or free will, morality, and consciousness, many believe that souls enable human relationships. To explore notions of the soul further, let's discuss the concept of free will. Free will is the ability that human beings have to select how they are going to behave. Now, most individuals believe that their actions are under their control, and they recognize that some of their actions are automatic. The understanding that human beings choose their behavior is foundational for any view that holds people responsible for their actions. Behaviorism was opposed in the mid-20th century because it viewed human behavior as being entirely dependent on environmental stimuli. Now, pause for a second and think about how different our society would be if people were not held accountable for their actions. There would be no need for law enforcement. There would be no behavior regulation or intervention in schools. There would be no monitoring of behavior on a federal or local level. And there are subsequent consequences that would follow this idea that there is no free will. Now, there is a lot of other research that suggests that the bulk of our behavior is under the influence of non-conscious processes. For example, background classical music is related to individuals buying top-shelf wine. Other examples include when we are walking with individuals moving at a brisk pace, we tend to adopt their gait and stride. And then finally, my last example deals with exposure to citrus smells. So exposure to citrus smells or any sense associated with cleanliness causes us to be more likely to clean. This research calls into question if we really have free will at all. Libet conducted research on intentional actions by having individuals hooked up to an EEG machine to measure their brain electrical activity while they engaged in flicks of the wrist or pressing a button when they wanted to. And he found that electrical activity was present in the brain approximately 500 milliseconds before they engaged in the action. In terms of the verbalization of their intention to flick their wrist or push the button, Libet found activity in their brains approximately 300 milliseconds before their intention. Given the latter conclusion, Libet believes that this offers support that there is no such thing as free will, given that electrical activity was present in the brain, showcasing a decision made before the person verbalized their decision. Brass, Hines, and Haynes drew similar conclusions to Libet's research, and that they found electrical activity in the frontal and parietal lobes prior to a person's actions. Libet believed that free will may play the role of vetoing behavior or a person making a decision to not act after making a decision to act. The research is not without its critics, though, in that some researchers believe that the brainwave activity seen is simply an indication of readiness to act and not necessarily a decision, given that the person has been given a task and it is solely being attended to. Baumeister, a leading researcher at Florida State University, conceptualized free will differently in that he thought it was an advanced form of free agency and action control that allowed people to resist natural animalistic behaviors and act in the best interest of self and others in a cultural context. He distinguished between 4 different aspects of free will, which include rational choice, intentionality, planning behavior, and self-control. Self-control is the capacity to stop one's response and do something else. Rational choice is determining which response is best given the situation and doing it. And planned behavior is the ability to make and follow plans. He believed that free will evolved due to escalating demands and opportunities intrinsic to human social life. He believes that free will also evolved because the body has limited energy reserves for bodily and psychological functions, and only a limited amount of energy could be used for free will purposes. Research has highlighted that engaging in self-controlled tasks makes subsequent tasks, these tasks can be performance level or involving self-control, difficult due to ego depletion or reduced energy capacities. For example, choosing to eat a healthy meal over something else results in noticeable decrements in performance on puzzle tasks after that decision making. Even suppressing emotions while watching a film can decrease one's performance on a puzzle task given shortly after. Making choices can be more debilitating than just weighing your preferences, and that individuals are making choices and they may be having difficulty on subsequent intellectual tasks involving logic and reasoning. It's thought that the energy resource that may be depleted is glucose, meaning the glucose levels drop when individuals are faced with tasks, but the exact mechanism by which it's dropped is not really clear. Alternative explanations may focus on how glucose works by activating brain areas associated with reward. Sometimes shifts in motivation from time 1, from self-control to self-gratification in time 2 affect the lower levels of performance seen on subsequent tasks given the attentional shift. The practical implication is that if free will is dependent on an energy resource, then that resource can be conserved and replenished. Through practice and exercise, one may be able to strengthen this resource. Given that free will helps to form and maintain group structures, it stands to reason that free will has been naturally selected by the environment. Research highlights that individuals who do not believe in free will are more aggressive and more likely to not help others than individuals who do. Additionally, there are brain areas associated with self-control, emotion, and reward associated with those things such as prefrontal cortex, frontal median cortex, and the striatum. In addition, high self-control is correlated with less pathology and more interpersonal success. I want to conclude this mini lecture by talking about the research by Gazzaniga. Gazzaniga is a researcher who studied both hemispheres of the brain and believes that there is no need to abandon free will because responsibility is not held in the brain, but rather it's carried out in the context of people. Additionally, he disagrees with the second bullet of what determinists believe, which includes the following. Number 1, the brain enables the mind. Number 2, the physical world is determined and thus the brain is determined. Number 3, because our brain and the world are determined, the mind is determined because it emerges from the brain. And number 4, mental events like free will are an illusion of the brain. Again, he disagrees with the second clause, the physical world is determined and thus the brain is determined, because the development of quantum physics in the early 20th century challenges whether the world is completely physically determined. Given the lack of conclusions about the nature of the world, some believe scientists should inform the public of the limited conclusions and allow them to make up their own minds. What I'm doing. Simply put, free will has not been completely answered by science and may involve questions and procedural methods that go beyond science. I'll leave you to decide.